This is an introduction to the wood fire process, a presentation that I've put together just to kind of walk you through some of the ideas and processes and images that are common in a wood firing and what's ahead of you in this class. So one thing that is really exciting, and of course this is a very dramatic photograph, and I'm prone to try to grab the most dramatic photography I can in this process, but we will be working directly with fire, and it's gorgeous. There's so much in the moment beauty of, especially at the highest temperatures, when the fire light is reflecting everywhere and creating quite a bit of beauty. And beauty is the subject. So one of the questions that comes to mind is, why would we wood fire? It's quite complicated. We'll need to split wood for almost a month, collect wood from the park and then split it. And then we have a great deal of time involved in loading the kiln, making wadding and setting the kiln up for firing. That takes a total of about a month before we start the firing. And then the firing is 7 days, 24 hours a day. And so that's quite a lot of work. And then there's a week of cooling. So overall, we're looking at about 6 to 7 weeks from start to finish. And that doesn't include the making of your artwork. So a question becomes, why are we doing this? Why would we possibly do this? When wood fire was invented, it was really the only option. That was the only way to heat ceramics is through wood firing. But now we're doing it, and the question is, when we have such modern conveniences like our cell phones, and I can take out my cell phone and order anything I need to be delivered to my home. I can call my brother in Tokyo. I have so many options for making things happen instantly. We're a sort of instant gratification culture, but now we are not doing that, and we're going back to do this 7-week wood fire process. And what that does is tell us something. It tells us that we're making a very clear decision. One wonders when, if we were to be able to transport back in time a Scott electric-fired kiln with a computer guidance on it and give that to a wood fire artist 1,200 years ago, would they just take advantage of that, load their work into that kiln, and then light it and or turn it on and walk away and have a firing completed in a day? Would they do that? So the important thing here for us to think about is that we're making a choice, and we're making a choice because we're artists, and this is a way to create our work that we have come to find vital for our own personal artistic vision. That's kind of one of the ways I would explain it. So what this writing in front of you says is, only beauty offers an acceptable explanation. And it can't be just beautiful. It's not just, oh, that's lovely, casually noted beauty. It has to be, it must be an extraordinary beauty, a heart-aching, arresting beauty, a beauty of epic proportions, a beauty worth working for. A beauty only achievable by way of wood firing. It can be no less. For what other goal would artists dedicate so much time and effort? So that's my thinking on this idea. And you can see, not only are the works that come out of here quite beautiful, but the process is gorgeous as well. I love this photograph, which is taken of a wood firing I participated in Estonia. And those houses are being bathed in the flame. Perhaps a bit of a shocking image given our current California history with fire. But those houses are made by the Turkish artist Sakan, and I just love this image. So here's an older photograph. So it's a team of artists working together. We'll work with anywhere from 10 to 20 artists to do the wood firing. And when we start firing, we'll be adding wood anywhere from every 2 to 4 minutes for 7 days for 24 hours. And here's a picture of a kiln building class that I taught. And I taught this class when we decided to build a new kind of kiln. And this kiln is called the Rosinante kiln, and we'll be firing this kiln as well. Here's a photograph of the group that helped build, some of the group that helped build the Rosinante kiln. And one of the things you start to realize is seeing all these group photos is that wood firing is a community building process. It is a way that we as artists work together and collaborate in a community. So it's called wood fire, and wood becomes a vital part of the process. We basically go through about a cord a day. A cord is 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet. And here's an image of some of the wood used to fire the Dancing Fire wood kiln. And then I just thought I'd throw in a few photographs of gratuitous, beautiful wood stacking. We haven't gotten into this too much, but I picture someday in the future that we will do some kind of decorative wood stacking. On the right, you can see one of our students stacking the wood that we use for our firings. Look at this one. This is a great pile of wood. So after we have been making our work for a while, we bring it to the kiln site, to the side of the kiln, and we begin to look at it, organize it, and we load the kiln, which often, for the Dancing Fire wood kiln, it takes at least a week to get the kiln fully loaded. So, and in that process, we have to clean the kiln, we clean the kiln shelves, we have to, some grinding is involved, and then we will also make lots and lots of wadding. Every piece needs to be separated in the kiln from the shelves and from each other by wadding. So a lot of time and effort and energy goes into creating wadding as well. Here's a look into the kiln as it's been loaded here, and you can see, if you look carefully, examples of wadding very much throughout the kiln. Every piece is sitting on wads. You can also see that there are cones, and we have to have multiple sets of cones to be able to monitor the firing as it progresses. And here's a great example of what the clay looks like going in, all this just bare white clay, and what it looks like coming out. So if you look to the left, you will see the pieces finished fired. Again, here's the back chamber of the Dancing Fire wood kiln loaded and ready for firing. And here's the front chamber of the kiln loaded and ready for firing. This is the quiet moments before we actually start loading the kiln. Here it is in the process of loading. This is the Rosinante kiln. And then before we get started, we have a lighting ceremony. And lighting ceremonies, again, it's part of the community coming together, but it plays a vital role in the wood firing process. We've been working at this stage for about a month getting ready to fire. And now the kiln is all bricked up and ready to go, ready to be fired. And the lighting ceremony is where we say, we gather around, we clean up everything. The whole area is organized and cleaned up so it's easy to work and it feels fresh. And then we get flowers and fresh fruit and all kinds of things for offerings to the kiln. And it's a time when we're gathered together in an effort to say, okay, we've been working hard and we've gotten to the base camp, and now it's time for us to climb the mountain. We're going to start the firing. So we take a moment, appreciate one another, and have a lighting ceremony. And some of it is quite traditional, which stems from almost Shinto times in Japan, Shinto traditions. So there's a lot of Japanese culture involved in this ceremony. And then towards the end, it's our own creation, a sort of Northern California special kind of ceremony. And here you can see images of us in the ceremony. Oftentimes we'll have guests coming. You can see there's a couple of professors from art history and English who've come and brought their classes to experience the lighting ceremony. This is, of course, pre-COVID times, so you can see there's no social distancing and no masks. And then I thought I'd point out, the 7 days of firing, all kinds of things can happen. Here's our fabulous professor, Rod Geyer, who also spins yarn from sheep's wool and other items. And so he set up his spinning wheel for a while and demonstrated that and made some wheel. The other thing that happens now, we don't have too many other professors working right now because our enrollment in the number of courses we offer has been reduced greatly. But in times when we had many professors, here's Kathy Kearns and Rod Geyer, both who were teaching at the time, and we're often around the wood kiln at the same time, and students can interact and learn from many professors at once. So it's a really great coming together of things. Another activity that happened once is we had a student who was a hairstylist, and she came in and set up her chair and gave free haircuts and hairstylings during the firing. And here's another special time. We've had a couple of celebrations over the years, a 10-year anniversary and a 20-year anniversary. And in that case, we did have, in both cases, we had a taiko drumming troupe come out and play for us. It was a fantastic experience. And we also had the Delbert Bump Jazz Quintet play as well. So jazz music and taiko drums, it really is it's a community center, this kiln. So then the firing does start, and the kiln is stoked every 2 to 4 minutes. Here you can see Monique Rutherford stoking the kiln. Notice wearing gloves. And here's a beautiful image from the kiln in Kohila, Estonia. There's a Russian artist and a Turkish artist in this picture from an international experience I had with wood firing. And that's another good example, is that wood firing is a community, kind of like you might find a culture around surfing or many other items. Wood firing has its own community and its own culture, and there are opportunities to get involved with it throughout the United States and throughout the world. Here's an image from a workshop I led in northeast Germany, in Altgarts. And here's a picture of the Estonia kiln from the front. So towards the end of the firing, we want to fire in reduction, and this can often be quite dramatic. Remember, your pieces are being fired with wood, and the ash over the days. The reason for the many days is that we're trying to build up ash covering. We're trying to get a glaze of ash, and we're also getting the influence of a kind of vaporized chemistry from the ash that travels in the flame. So these are the things that are coloring over time. And we're also manipulating temperature, the change of temperature up and down over time, and we're manipulating the atmosphere, so the presence or absence of oxygen. And so this is the reduction process that reduces oxygen in the kiln. And here's that wonderful photograph of firing around the front of the kiln. We figure out what's going on in the kiln in a number of different ways. One of them is by draw rings or baskets. That way we can see how much ash is actually built up and how much reduction has occurred on that ash. We also look at cones. We have a way we can see how the kiln firing is progressing by which cones have fallen. And you can see the draw rings in the front of the cones and the cones in the back. And we also have a pyrometer, which is giving us a moment-to-moment readout of temperature. We also have all kinds of fun. We have a pizza kiln. We have a pizza oven, 2 of them that have been built on the kilns, and we'll often have an evening of pizza during the firing. So it's important to have fun and to eat well. So after it's done, then there's an unloading, and the unloading is a very important point. It's a place where we learn a great deal. We try to figure out what happened, where the good results are, and how we got those results and how we can encourage those kinds of results in the future. And when you open it up, you observe things like you'll see we have this warm brown and green and all kinds of subtle colors of blacks and purples and all different kinds of colors throughout the clay. And you can see some very white pieces as well, and those white pieces are porcelain clay. Here's a piece highlighting the Rosinante kiln and how remarkable it can be. It has a tremendous intense, some zones that are so very intense that the buildup of ash is quite physical and quite intense. And you have to have the right piece. Sometimes it'll eat right through a thinner piece. So you need to have the right thickness of piece to go into some of these areas where things are very very dramatic and produce tremendous amounts of ash. So we'll look at some pieces. Here's a lovely piece by Monique Rutherford. And here's the back of that piece. And you can see how the passage of ash and flame really take advantage of a softly curving form, which is a much more subtle effect. I will often put lots of texture, and here's an example of that. This piece was fired in the Dancing Fire wood kiln. It's about 6 total pieces, and they were taken apart and fired. And you can see that it's a different kind of effect when you have all this geometry and changing direction of the surfaces will do different things with the way the ash is moving across the surface. Here's another example of that kind of wood fire. Another piece by Monique Rutherford. She's a master of slab building and stretch textures. And here's a lovely piece of mixed media work by Lisa Jettone, who has done a wonderful body of work using found objects and wood-fired clay elements. Love these little pieces here. Here's another Monique Rutherford piece. In this piece, Monique has pushed in small quartz stones, which are the white ones, and some feldspar stones, which melt out even more. Here's the back side of that piece. And some installation work by Mary Petty Sarley, who created this piece. And you can see the torso element was fired in our wood kiln. And here's a piece by Melody Nix, and what Melody did is she created a sculpture working from the model. She broke the piece down she broke it into many pieces, and then we loaded those pieces throughout the kiln in different locations, so they all got different surfaces and different colors, and then she glued the piece back together again. Here's another Monique Rutherford stretch slab piece. And she wraps these around blocks of wood, several 2x4s or 4x4s put together to create a form that you can wrap these slabs around. Here's some coil-built sculpture by Tree Tran, also a student who started out at Solano College working with our wood fire kiln. Show you some of his work. Again, these are coil-built sculptures. This is a slab-built tsukubai, a water basin for tea ceremony. Here's a few pieces by Kathy Kearns. And some by Rod Geyer. Here, this piece is made with, he's got a braised chino on the surface, and that's responding to the ash. And so the use of glazes becomes an interesting process as well. Here's a piece of a plate that has been fired upside down, and you can see the beautiful markings. Those 3 spots are where the wadding has been placed on the plate, and then it was placed upside down, and the flame actually creates these comets as it moves from the front to the back. And one of the things to think about always is how the wadding may enhance your design. That's Rod Geyer. And here are a few pieces by Scott Parody, who taught with us for a year or two before going on to take the position at Sacramento State University. And here are a few more pieces that I've done. I've done a lot of wood fire painting over the years. Here are some examples of that. Another piece by Monique Rutherford. Here's a sculpture I've created. This is by me. This is called the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is from the series The Boats from Nusa Lambangan. So, developed over 1,000 years and then refined for another 1,000, wood firing perhaps is entering an age of its greatest transformation to date. It is now being rediscovered across the globe, not only as an ancient tradition, but also as an expressive tool for contemporary art. And that's a quote from the book I wrote with Kusakabe on wood-fired ceramics. And then for more information, well, you're going to class, and you can learn there. You can go to the Facebook page Solano Woodfire Kiln, or you can always write me at mark.lancet@solano.edu.